Somewhere in your garden, there's a plant that does not belong to you. Not really. It belongs to someone who is no longer here. Maybe it is the tomato variety your grandmother grew every summer in her backyard, the one she never bought from a store because she saved the seeds every August and replanted them every March. Maybe it is the mint that your mother kept in a clay pot by the kitchen door, the one she would pinch whenever she made tea. Maybe it is the rose bush your grandfather planted the year your mother was born, the same one that a cutting from his garden now grows in yours. You did not choose this plant for its yield, its hardiness, or its disease resistance. You chose it because someone you loved grew it, and growing it yourself is the only way you know how to keep them close. This is not nostalgia. Nostalgia is looking at old photographs and feeling a warm ache. This is different. This is putting your hands in the same soil, planting the same seed, tending the same life cycle that someone before you tended. And it does something to you that no photograph, no home video, no family story told at the dinner table can replicate. Today, you are going to discover exactly the psychology behind people who grow what their grandparents grew. And by the end, you will understand why a single plant in your garden might be doing more for your emotional health than you ever realized, and why science says the continuity between your hands and theirs is not metaphorical, it is biological. Let us start with what you carry but rarely say out loud. You remember the garden. Not the house, not the furniture, not the car in the driveway, the garden. You remember the smell of your grandmother's tomato plants in July, that sharp green smell that stuck to your hands when you brushed against the leaves. You remember the sound of the hose hitting the soil in the evening. You remember the taste of something picked straight off the vine while it was still warm from the sun. These memories are not stored the way your brain stores facts or dates. They are stored with the body. They live in your hands, your nose, your mouth, and they activate every time you do what they did. You also carry a weight that is harder to describe. The weight of knowing that you are the one who keeps this going. If you stop planting this variety, it ends. The lineage that your great-grandmother started that passed through your grandmother, through your mother, through you, stops. Nobody else in the family is doing this. Your brother lives in a city apartment. Your cousin does not garden. You are the one. And that is both a privilege and a pressure that sits quietly in the back of your mind every planting season. There is a ritual you perform that nobody else sees. When you plant the seeds that came from your grandmother's line, you do it differently, more carefully, more slowly. You press each seed into the soil with intention. You water gently. You check on them more often than the others, not because they are more fragile, because they carry more weight. If the hybrid tomato from the garden center fails, you lose a plant. If this one fails, you lose a thread that connects you to someone you will never see again. And there is the moment that catches you off guard, the one you did not expect. The plant is growing. It is midsummer. The fruit appears, or the flower opens, or the herb reaches the height you remember it reaching in their garden. And for a second, just a second, they are there, not as a memory, as a presence. Something in the color of the leaf, the shape of the fruit, the smell when you crush a leaf between your fingers, brings them back into the present tense. Not, I remember grandmother, but grandmother is here. It passes quickly, but it leaves something behind that lasts for days. Most people would call this sentimental. Your spouse might smile gently if you told them. A friend might nod and move on. But what is happening in those moments goes far beyond sentiment, and the science behind it is extraordinary. The first thing you need to understand is that the plant in your garden is not like the plant your grandmother grew. In many cases, especially with open-pollinated and heirloom varieties, it carries the same genetic material. Seeds saved from fruit, replanted season after season, generation after generation, produce plants that are genetically continuous with the originals. The tomato in your garden right now contains DNA that is functionally identical to the one your grandmother picked in 1974. This is not metaphor. This is botany. The continuity is material. The plant is, in a biological sense, the same plant, propagated through time by human hands, including hers, including yours. This matters for the psychology, because the brain processes continuity differently from similarity. The new tomato from the store is similar to your grandmother's tomato. The one you grew from her saved seeds is continuous with it. And the brain, specifically the systems that handle attachment, identity, and grief, responds to continuity with a depth that similarity cannot trigger. The second mechanism is about grief, and it explains why growing these plants feels so different from other forms of remembering. Grief is one of the most devastating human emotions because it requires accepting permanent absence. The person is gone. There is no way to bring them back. Every form of remembering, photographs, stories, objects they owned, reinforces this. You are looking at evidence of someone who no longer exists. Each reminder confirms the absence. Gardening reverses this. When you plant what they planted, the direction changes. You're not looking backward at evidence of absence. You are looking forward at evidence of continuation. The seed germinates. The plant grows. The fruit appears. Life that they initiated is still unfolding, still producing, still here. The grief does not disappear, but it reorganizes. It transforms from they are gone into what they started is still alive. And that transformation, that reframe from absence to ongoing presence, is something that very few forms of therapy can achieve as directly as a living plant in your soil. Researchers studying bereavement have found that people who maintain active, continuing bonds with the deceased, meaning they maintain rituals, practices, or symbolic connections, rather than trying to move on and detach, often show healthier long-term grief outcomes. The garden is the most literal form of a continuing bond possible. You're not keeping a photograph. You are keeping a living organism that requires your daily attention and care, the same attention and care that they once provided. The bond is not symbolic, it is alive. The third mechanism connects to something even deeper, and it explains the physical sensation you feel when you work with these specific plants. There's a concept in psychology called embodied cognition. It means that the body does not just execute commands from the brain. It actively participates in emotional processing. When you perform the same physical actions that someone you love performed, your body generates emotional states that abstract thinking cannot. Kneeling in the soil the way your grandmother knelt, holding a tomato the way she held it, pressing a seed into the earth with the same motion her hands made. These are not symbolic gestures. They are physical reenactments that activate motor memory, sensory association, and emotional circuits simultaneously. This is why growing their plants feels different from looking at their photograph. The photograph activates visual memory. The garden activates your entire body. Hands, knees, back, nose, mouth. You're not remembering them. You're physically occupying the same posture, performing the same actions, touching the same materials. And your body, through channels that the conscious mind cannot access, registers this as proximity, as closeness, as presence. There is one more layer, and it is the one that gives this behavior its full weight. When you save seed from the plant your grandmother grew, and you give those seeds to your child, or your neighbor, or a fellow gardener at a seed swap, you are doing something that transcends individual grief. You are participating in a chain of transmission that predates recorded history. For thousands of years, the primary way that plant varieties survived was through human hands. A grandmother saved seed. A mother planted it. A daughter carried it to a new home. A son traded it at a market. This is how heirloom varieties exist at all. They exist because people like you refuse to let them end. The plant in your garden is not just a connection to your grandmother. It is a connection to the entire chain of hands that kept it alive before her. And when you pass it forward, you extend that chain into a future you will never see. The grief becomes generative, and the loss becomes legacy. The plant that started as a way to remember someone becomes a way to give something to people you will never meet. So when someone looks at your garden and sees a slightly scraggly heirloom tomato that produces less than the modern hybrid next to it, what is actually there is this: a living genetic thread connecting you to a person who shaped you. A daily ritual of physical reenactment that processes grief through the body rather than through the mind. An active continuing bond with someone you lost, maintained not through memory but through life itself. And a link in a chain of human hands that stretches back centuries, and because of you, stretches forward. You're not being sentimental. You're not being impractical. You're doing something that the modern world has almost entirely forgotten how to do, keeping the dead alive through living things. And the garden is the only place where that is literally, biologically, materially possible. If this is the first time you are here and you recognized yourself in what you heard, subscribe. This channel was made for people like us, and tell me in the comments, what do you grow that connects you to someone who is no longer here? What is the plant, and who gave it to you? I want to hear your story.